In this video, I'm going to be talking about congressional elections. Just a few things that I want you to know about how people run for the House and the Senate. So let's start just by talking about how many people we're talking about. In the Senate, about a third of the seats are up for re-election every 2 years. So that's going to be 33 or 34, although sometimes there will be some additional people running because there's a special election. Maybe somebody passed away or someone took another job and decided to leave their seat. And so at the next available election, there will be a special election to fill that seat. In the House, it's all 435 every 2 years. There can also be a special election for the House, but that's going to happen as those vacancies come up. For the Senate, when there's a vacancy, the governor can appoint someone to temporarily take that position until the next regularly scheduled federal election day. Because remember, the Senate was designed originally to represent the states, and so the governor has that power. But in the House, which was the people's house, elected directly by the people, the governor cannot fill a seat. It has to be filled by a special election. So that will happen as soon as is practically possible if someone is to die or to leave their seat voluntarily. So every 2 years then, every even-numbered year, we've got 435 people in the House and a third or more of people in the Senate who are running for election. So let's take a look at the state of the 2020 House election as of right now. So this map was updated on September 18th of 2020. And what you see here is all of the different House districts. And if we were to zoom in really, really far, you would see all these tiny little districts. But this gives you a sense of the 435 seats that are up for re-election. What is the current polling or expectation about who will win? And so you can see that if the election were held on September 18th, we would expect that Democrats would probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of 224 House seats, which would allow them to maintain their current majority by a fairly slim margin. You need 218 seats to have a majority. The Republicans would likely have 188, and then there are 23 that are totally toss-ups. So they could really go anyway, and we'll see how that goes. So this, by the way, comes from a website. You can see it down here in the corner, 270 to win. It's 270towin.com, and you can go there and you can play around. You can actually, kind of do some predicting here about how you think different districts will go, and you can play with the numbers for House, Senate, and President. The current Senate map looks something like this. So notice, by the way, that Georgia has an asterisk, and that's because both of the seats in Georgia are on the ballot, and both of them are competitive. Now, why is that? One of the seats was vacated not too long ago by an incumbent senator who has had some health problems, and so the governor appointed someone to hold that seat in the interim, and so they're having a special election for that one, and then the other seat is just due on cycle to be up for election. So you'll see that currently there are 35 seats, and so that's the 34 that we would expect plus that one that's a special seat. And generally speaking, you can see where the ones that are currently held by Democrats and Republicans, and then which ones we think might be potentially switchable. And so, if the election were held today, it's really hard to say who would win, but the numbers are close. The numbers are really close. And if you go to that 270towin.com site, you can take a closer look at that. Okay, I want to just briefly show you this graph, and it's a little confusing, but that's because I'm trying to give you a lot of information. So let me just tell you that this goes from 1986 to 2016. The bars here are the amount of money spent in the average House race and the key is over here. So in 1986, if you wanted to win a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives, it would have cost you slightly less than $700,000. And I'm not suggesting that you like show up with a check and then you have a seat. This is how much money the person who won in the average race spent on advertising and such. And this money is raised from donors and other things. We skip up here to 2016. And in 2016, the average winner of a House seat spent about $1.5 million. So you can kind of see how those spending trends changed over time. The line is for Senate. Now, the Senate, for the most part, is every 2 years, but it's not as many people. And so it's not, and just understand that the line is representing more variation because of the differences in the group of people who are running every 2 years. So anyway, the legend for Senate is over here, and the reason that I stacked them like this is because otherwise you would see a tiny little line that doesn't seem to move for the House, because the Senate moves around quite a lot. So in 1986, the average successful Senate candidate raised and spent about $1 million to get their seat. And this has been on a generally upward trend until 2016, when it was just a little bit under $10 million that the average person who won a seat in the Senate raised in order to win that seat. I want to talk just a little bit about something that political scientists and other observers call the incumbency advantage. So in the House of Representatives, on average, about 95-96% of people who currently hold a seat will get reelected for another term. In the Senate, that number is closer to 90%, although it varies year to year. And so the question is, why do incumbents win so often? Here are a few reasons. One is just that people recognize their names. So you may not know who your member of the House or the Senate is, but if you saw the name, you would say, I feel like I've seen that before. And so that familiarity, one of the key principles of marketing is familiarity. That name recognition will lead you to prefer that person if you have no other information. Incumbents have better visibility, so when they have events, more people turn up. They can send mail to their constituents at no cost using something called the franking privilege. So the frank is really just their signature. So if a member of Congress wants to send you, their constituent, a piece of mail, they can just sign their name instead of putting a stamp, and it'll come to you for free. Now, they can't do that 30 days before an election. And we're currently, a little more than 30 days in front of election. So in the next week or two, just look and see if maybe you get something from a member of Congress. Maybe your House of Representatives member might send you something, especially if you lived in a competitive district, which most of you do not. Casework is another really big advantage. So casework is one of the biggest line item expenses for members of the House and the Senate. And what this means is that if you as a citizen are having an issue with something related to the federal government, say you're a veteran and you can't get in at the VA hospital because it's too busy, or you get a Social Security check and for some reason it didn't come this month, you can call the staff of your member of Congress's office and they will help you try to figure out what went wrong in the federal bureaucracy. They can't do anything for you that's like extra special favor. They can only do what those agencies are allowed to do. So they can't get you special treatment. But if you work in a federal agency and someone from a member of the Senate's staff calls you and says, hey, Liz Norrell didn't get her whatever benefit this month, you're going to go ahead and get on that because you don't want the Senate like calling you up to Capitol Hill or your boss up to Capitol Hill to a hearing to answer embarrassing questions about how you're not doing your job very effectively. So it's a big plus. The last thing that I want to say about why incumbents win so often, and I want to talk about this in the context of both the incumbency advantage and also the money, because I think oftentimes we have this perception that members of Congress just do whatever it is that their donors pay them to do. And, there's a lot of correlational evidence to suggest that the money and the votes happen at the same time. But the question of causation is rarely answerable. So let's say you have an issue that you care a lot about. Let's say you really want to make sure, I'm going to go back, way back here. You really want to save the spotted owl, and you're worried about people cutting down lots of trees and the owls don't have anywhere to build their nests. So you want to, you and your friends who love the spotted owl, pool your money. You've got $1,000 that you want to donate to members of Congress to ensure that they're going to continue to advance this cause that you care about. You can either decide to give that money to someone who promises really that this is a concern near and dear to their heart, so please support me so that I can win election and fight this fight for you. Or you could give it to someone who's already served in Congress and has previously taken votes to save the spotted owl. Are you going to roll the dice on someone who's never been in Congress before and just promises that they will? Or are you going to give it to someone who has a proven track record and has done this in the past, and so you're pretty confident they'll do it again? Of course, it's going to be the latter. And so the money tends to flow to the campaigns of people who have an established track record because we know what their preferences are. We know where their commitments are ideologically. People who've never served in that role before are a little bit of a crapshoot. Like we're taking them at their word, but we don't have any guarantee, and we certainly can't sign a contract with them. And so the incumbent is the safer bet, and the incumbent consequently becomes much more likely to win because they just do better in fundraising. So hopefully that helps address some of the questions that you might have about congressional elections and why it is that we have the same people getting elected over and over. The question of term limits is another one that we'll probably talk about in class a little bit, but think about that and think about if you are someone who cares passionately about an issue. Term limits are going to limit your ability to choose someone that you can be confident is going to support your particular legislative agenda. Anyway, I look forward to chatting with you about some of this. Thanks for watching.